Admiral Stav, it's a pleasure to have you on. So tell me, what made you write this novel? It's set in, this is the World War II era.
It is. And by the way, I'm wearing a tie today with Winston Churchill on it. And Churchill, the most quotable man in the world, said, the further you want to look into the future, the more you must look to the past. That's pretty smart thinking. And so I thought, let's take a look at that World War II era, because here we see a great power conflict in the Pacific. We don't have to imagine what that would look like. We fought one with Japan. What would that imply for a war with China? Secondly, the rise of sweeping technology that's changing on the battlefield in Ukraine occurred also in World War II. Cryptography, the use of aircraft carriers, sonar, radar. And third and finally, Fareed, it's wonderful to write fiction because you can tell stories, and there's a wonderful kind of steamy love triangle happening here, eternal, as always, with the backdrop of war. And finally, the little Easter egg in the book is it's loosely based on Dante's Inferno.
How you can manage to put all that into one book. But tell me, so to start with the part you said, so when in doing the book, what insight did you gain about what will be the complexity of a war in the Pacific? Because the thing I always think about is that's 11,000 miles from us. If we're talking about Taiwan, it's 100 miles for China.
That's the first lesson, is the vast landscape, the huge canvas that you'd have to paint this war upon. You know how big the Pacific Ocean is? You can take all the land on Earth and would fit inside the Pacific Ocean. So point one, vast scale. Point two, be prepared for sudden technology changes. We saw that in World War II. We've seen that in Ukraine. We'll certainly see that in a great power war with China.
Who has the advantage in a situation like that? Who can play asymmetrical warfare? Because, you know, the Chinese are right there. We will bring in our huge aircraft carriers. What's the effective balance of power?
Clearly, we are going to face a challenge because China itself is one enormous aircraft carrier. And so how do we balance that? We do it through a network of allies, partners, and friends. That's Japan, where we have significant bases, South Korea, and by the way, we just negotiated new agreements with the Philippines, where we have a president who is now working with America again to put military access and bases on the island of Luzon. That's a few hundred kilometers from Taiwan. So we will have not only our maritime aircraft carriers, but our land-based air operating from allies, partners, and friends bases will be crucial in this war.
And the Chinese, if you were to guess, would they try an actual invasion of Taiwan, or would they try something short?
They would try something short. I'll tell you why. Anybody who's watched Game of Thrones knows that there are castles in the Middle Ages and they have moats around them. There's a reason you build moats. Water is a significant obstacle, and Taiwan is 100 miles of open seaway off of China, very hard seas. So an invasion force which has to go slow and approach the beach and think D-Day, huge casualties. So I think the Chinese will begin with a cyber attack, follow it with a bombardment, and then put a blockade around the island. And they will step back and say, we're not actually invading, and challenge the U.S. How hard do you really want to come to the aid of this democracy?
Finally, got to ask you, give me, in a way that would be understandable to most people and to me, what is the Dante's Inferno angle in here?
Sure. If you think about the Divine Comedy by Dante Alighieri, it's 3 volumes. It's the Inferno, the Purgatorio, and Paradiso. You go to paradise. It's a story of ascending through enormous challenge. But before you can ascend to paradise, you have to pass through the levels of hell. And if you look at the war in the Pacific, Pearl Harbor, Midway, Leyte Gulf, Okinawa, Iwo Jima, each of these is like another level of hell in the combat fight that leads eventually to victory. the analogy is you fight through, you have to be resilient, you make mistakes, especially as a young person, but you persevere.
So not quite abandon all hope, ye who enter. Abandon most hope.
Abandon most hope. And by the way, that's the first thing quoted when the young group of midshipmen entered the U.S. Naval Academy.
Is that right?
Exactly.
James Stav, it's a pleasure to have you on.
Always my pleasure. Thanks for reading.